Assalamualaikum, my name is Noor Alysya Binti Azman, and today I'll be presenting an article by Miura Sachiko titled University Students' Attitudes Toward Varieties of English. The study looks at how Japanese university students perceive 6 different English accents, including both native varieties like British and American English, and the non-native one like Indian, Singaporean, Scottish, and Australian. Miura focused on 3 main ideas, which is the first one, students' attitudes towards English as a global lingua franca. Second, their exposure to English through education. Third one, their perceptions of these different accents. The finding shows a strong preference for native accents, especially RP and the GA, which students see as a clearer and more prestigious. This bias, Miura argues, come from an early exposure in school that promote native English as the standard. As a result, students have a narrow understanding of global English and may even feel anxious about sounding non-native. The author further suggests that English teaching in Japan should include more diverse accents to help students communicate more effectively in international settings. Moving on to the strengths that I noticed in the article is one thing I really liked was how clear and structured the study was. The author used actual speech recordings and got students to rate them using 2 questionnaires. She then analyzed the data using tools like ANOVA and correlation, which gave more depth to the finding. For example, American English was rated the highest for clarity and friendliness, which clearly shows that native speaker bias is still very strong. I also like how Miura didn't just stop at the numbers. She connected the result to the bigger ideas like cut through 3 circles models and gave some practical suggestions for the English education, like encouraging teachers to use more non-native accent in the class. I think this is really important, especially now that English is used for more international communication, not just with the native speaker. What really made me reflect with the article is how students often feel pressured to sound like a native speaker. Me as a Malaysian growing up in Malaysia, we are really exposed to how the native sounds like. So growing up, I want to speak like them. I want to talk how the native talk. I want to pronounce the word correctly like them. Even when we pronounce our word incorrectly, they would say, that is wrong. It is pronounced like this. So when we focus too much on one accent, I noticed it made me feel self-conscious and less talkative because I was worried if I pronounced the word incorrectly. I think that is one thing that I can deeply reflect when I'm studying about this article. Moving on to the weaknesses that I noticed is the first, the study only involved 56 students and most of them were actually English majors, and that's a pretty small group size for a sample size, and it is hard to say whether the result would apply to the other students like the science, business courses. Also, the study focuses on only students' opinion of each accent. It doesn't actually test whether they could understand or communicate with those speakers. For example, Indian and Singaporean English were rated lower in clarity, but that doesn't mean that students couldn't follow what was being said. I think it would be better if the author included some kind of comprehension test to make the finding more complete. Another weakness that I noticed is actually one of the hypotheses that the students with more global awareness would be more accepting of non-native varieties wasn't really supported by the data. That weakens one of the part of the article's argument. And lastly, while the author suggests that the students who prefer native accents also feel more anxiety about speaking, that also wasn't proven in the data clearly. Moving on to the CRAB test. Clarity, the article is well organized and easy to read. Relevance, it matches the topic of English accents and language attitudes. Authority, the author is credible and used well-known sources like Katru and the Crystal. Accuracy, the study used real data, surveys and statistics like ANOVA, and for the purpose, I think it is clear that the goal is to show how students view English accents and to promote more exposure to the non-native English. In conclusion, Mira's study shows that Japanese students still prefer the native English accents and are less accepting for the non-native varieties. This reflects a limited understanding of English as a global language. Mira suggests that schools should expose students to more English varieties to help them communicate better in real-world international settings. With that being said, English is for all of us. English is not just one variety, it is a lot of varieties, and we should all learn from one another, and we should accept all kind of English with an open mind and not judge one another on how they speak, on how they sound. Instead, we should all just accept all kind of English to the better world harmony. That is all for my presentation. Thank you and Assalamualaikum.